The hospital room was filled with excitement and nervous energy. The mother, tired but smiling, had just given birth to twins. The father stood nearby, waiting to see his daughters for the very first time. Nurses whispered to each other as they carefully wrapped the newborns in soft blankets. At first, everyone thought it was a normal delivery, but when the babies were placed side by side, silence filled the room. One baby had golden hair, fair skin, and eyes as blue as the morning sky. She looked almost like a doll, delicate and bright. The other baby had dark brown skin, curly black hair, and deep shining brown eyes that seemed to hold mystery even on the first day. They were twins born from the same mother and father, yet they looked completely different. It was as if nature had painted two children with two opposite brushes. The father's eyes grew wide in surprise. He looked at his wife, then back at the babies. The mother, though exhausted, noticed it too. For a moment, she feared people might think something was wrong, but the doctor quickly explained that genetics could play tricks like this. Sometimes the mix of family bloodlines can create the most unexpected results. Still, no one in the room could believe what they were seeing. Nurses leaned closer to check if the babies were really twins. One of them whispered, "I've never seen anything like this before." Another nodded, her hands trembling as she held the lighter-skinned baby. Even though the explanation was scientific, the sight felt like a miracle. When the news reached the rest of the hospital, doctors and staff came to peek inside. They smiled, shook their heads in disbelief, and whispered among themselves. Some said it was rare, others said it was beautiful. Soon the small hospital room turned into a place of wonder. For the parents, the moment was emotional. The father gently touched both babies' tiny hands. He saw that despite their different colors, they both held his finger the same way, tightly as if they didn't want to let go. Tears filled his eyes. He realized that while the world might focus on their differences, he only saw his daughters, two pieces of his heart now living outside his body. The mother, lying on the bed, pulled the babies close to her chest. She whispered softly, "You are sisters. You are one family. Don't let the world tell you otherwise." Her words were filled with love and also a kind of fear. She already knew that the outside world could be harsh, that people might not accept what they didn't understand. As the babies slept peacefully in their mother's arms, the father took out his phone and captured their first photo together. Later, when relatives saw the picture, they too were shocked. Some thought it was a mistake. Others believed the photo was edited. Only when they visited the hospital and saw the twins with their own eyes did they believe. The family room buzzed with questions. How is this possible? Are they really twins? Will they grow to look more alike? The grandparents had mixed emotions. The grandmother on the father's side smiled and said, "They are both beautiful. God has given us two blessings." But the other grandmother worried. "What will people say? How will they be treated when they grow older?" she asked. As days turned into weeks, the twins grew stronger and healthier. Every time the mother took them outside in a stroller, strangers would stop and stare. Some smiled warmly, calling the babies unique and special. Others asked uncomfortable questions. Are they adopted? Are you sure they are twins? The mother learned to answer calmly, but deep inside she sometimes felt hurt. She knew her daughters would face questions like these all their lives. Despite all the attention, the parents made a decision. They would raise the twins with love, without letting society divide them. They promised to teach them that beauty comes in many forms, and that true family is never measured by skin color or appearance. The twins' bond was unshakable even as infants. Whenever one cried, the other would turn her head and reach out with tiny fingers, as if trying to comfort her sister. At night, when placed in separate cribs, they often fussed until they were moved closer together. Only then would they fall asleep side by side, their little hands touching through the blankets. Word about the twins spread beyond the hospital and neighborhood. Soon, local newspapers picked up the story. Headlines read, "Twins born with different colors astonish community." Photos of the girls smiling in their parents' arms went viral. The family, once ordinary, now found themselves at the center of attention. Reporters came knocking at their door asking for interviews. Some people praised them, saying their twins were a sign of nature's beauty. Others whispered behind their backs, questioning, doubting, even gossiping. Through it all, the parents stood firm. To them, their daughters were not a mystery to be solved or a story to be told. They were simply their children. Two halves of their hearts born together in one unforgettable moment. That birth, which shocked everyone around them, became the beginning of a journey that would shape not only the twins' lives, but also challenge the way people thought about identity, family, and love. From the very beginning, the twins could never hide from the eyes of the world. Everywhere they went, people noticed them. Their parents had imagined a quiet, normal childhood for their daughters, but instead, it was like raising two tiny celebrities. When the family walked down the street, heads turned, whispers followed, and strangers often stopped in their tracks. At first, the parents tried to shield the girls. They avoided crowded places, but even simple errands became complicated. In the grocery store, curious shoppers leaned over the stroller, asking question after question. Are they really sisters? How can this be? Are you sure they aren't adopted? The mother would smile politely, but deep down she wished people could see beyond appearances. When the twins were toddlers, their differences became even more visible. One had hair so light it shone golden under the sun, while the other's curls bounced like black silk in the wind. They dressed in matching outfits, but no matter how similar the clothes, people only saw the contrast in their skin. For many, they were not just children. They were a puzzle, a headline, an oddity. As they grew older, school became their stage, even when they never asked for it. On the first day of kindergarten, the classroom fell silent when they walked in. Children, innocent but curious, stared with wide eyes. Some whispered, "How can they be twins?" Others laughed, pointing out the obvious differences. Teachers struggled to explain, often using big words the other kids didn't understand. Genetics, DNA, family heritage. To the twins, those words didn't matter. All they wanted was to be seen as sisters, not as science projects. The attention didn't stop there. Every school photo day, parents of other children asked to take extra pictures with the twins. They wanted to show friends at home, to prove they had seen the famous girls in person. The twins smiled for the cameras, but when the flashes ended, they often wondered why no one wanted to know their names, their hobbies, or what games they liked to play. To most, they weren't two little girls, they were the different color twins. But under the weight of the spotlight, the twins developed a bond that only grew stronger. They leaned on each other like two trees growing side by side, sharing the same roots. When one felt lonely, the other reached out. When one was teased on the playground, the other stood tall and defended her. Their closeness confused people even more. Strangers expected them to be distant, to live separate lives because of how they looked. Instead, they were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and holding hands even as they walked into their teenage years. Yet the spotlight wasn't always kind. At times, the girls felt trapped by it. When the lighter-skinned twin won a small role in a school play, rumors spread that she got it only because she looked more beautiful. When the darker-skinned twin excelled in sports, whispers followed that people only noticed her because of the contrast she made standing next to her sister. The world rarely gave them credit for their true abilities. It always came back to the way they looked. Despite the challenges, their parents reminded them that being noticed could also be a gift. "You were born different," their father often said. But different can mean powerful. Different can mean unforgettable. Their mother added, "Let the world see your strength, not just your skin." These words sank deep into the twins' hearts, becoming a quiet strength they carried everywhere. By the time they reached middle school, journalists who once covered their birth returned for updates. Cameras appeared again, asking them to pose for new pictures. The twins, older now, felt a strange mix of pride and exhaustion. On one hand, they understood why people were fascinated. On the other, they wished the world would let them breathe, laugh, and grow like ordinary children. Even with all the attention, the sisters found ways to escape the spotlight. At night, in their shared bedroom, they whispered dreams to each other. One wanted to explore the stars and study science. The other dreamed of painting, of filling canvases with colors as unique as their lives. In those quiet moments, there were no cameras, no reporters, no curious neighbors, just two sisters sharing secrets under the blanket of night. The spotlight followed them wherever they went. But what the world couldn't see was the private story unfolding between them. Behind every smile in the newspaper photo, behind every wave to curious strangers, there were two hearts learning how to carry the weight of being different. They didn't yet know it, but the spotlight that sometimes felt like a curse would one day give them the power to share their story with millions. The world saw them as unusual, but to each other, they were just sisters, and that truth was stronger than any attention, any question, or any doubt. The twins had grown used to the stares, the whispers, and the endless questions from strangers. But the real test began when they started to see themselves through the eyes of others. Childhood innocence slowly faded, and with it came new doubts that neither sister had ever felt before. The lighter-skinned twin often heard compliments from teachers and neighbors. People praised her golden hair, her blue eyes, and her pretty smile. At first she enjoyed the attention, but over time it made her uneasy. Why did everyone talk about her appearance more than her drawings or her grades? Why did no one ask about the stories she wrote in her notebook or the poems she kept hidden under her pillow? The darker-skinned twin, on the other hand, faced the opposite treatment. When people met her, they sometimes hesitated. They asked if she was really the sister, or if she had come from another family. Some children at school teased her, calling her the odd one or the shadow twin. Even though she was strong and athletic, she often felt invisible when standing next to her sister. At home, their parents tried to remind them that they were equal, that their worth was not decided by the color of their skin. But outside the house, the world seemed determined to divide them. One was labeled beautiful, the other different. One was given a place in the spotlight, the other left in the background. This imbalance began to weigh on their hearts. The lighter-skinned twin sometimes cried at night, feeling guilty for the attention she received. "I don't want to be treated better than you," she whispered to her sister. But the darker-skinned twin shook her head and held her hand. "It's not your fault," she said. Still, deep inside, she longed to be seen for who she was, not for how she looked. The struggle grew sharper during their teenage years. Social media had entered their lives, and once again, their faces became a topic of fascination. Photos of them spread quickly online. Strangers left comments, some kind, others cruel. "She's gorgeous," someone wrote about the lighter-skinned twin. "She can't be your real sister," another wrote about the darker-skinned one. Reading those words felt like a cut, each comment leaving behind scars that could not be seen but could always be felt. The twins, once inseparable in childhood, began to drift ever so slightly. Not because they loved each other any less, but because they didn't know how to handle the world's obsession with their differences. At school dances, the lighter-skinned twin was asked to dance more often. The darker-skinned twin pretended not to care, but when she went home, she sometimes cried into her pillow, wondering why she wasn't enough. There were moments when the sisters even argued. "You don't know what it's like to be ignored," the darker one said angrily. "And you don't know what it's like to be treated like an object instead of a person," the lighter one shot back. The words hurt, but beneath the pain, both of them knew the truth. They were victims of the same world, just in different ways. Still, their bond never fully broke. When the darker-skinned twin was bullied in the hallway one afternoon, her sister stood in front of her like a shield, daring anyone to say another word. When the lighter-skinned twin grew tired of the endless comments about her looks, her sister reminded her that she was more than a face, that she was smart, kind, and talented. In a world that tried to separate them, they continued to choose each other. Their struggles with identity were not just about how people saw them, it was also about how they saw themselves. They spent countless nights asking questions no teenager should have to ask. Who am I really? Why was I born this way? Will people ever see me for more than my skin? These questions had no easy answers, but in their search for meaning, the twins began to develop resilience. By the time they reached the end of high school, they had learned something powerful. Identity is not given by the world, it is built from within. They realized that no matter how much people compared them, no matter how many labels were thrown their way, only they could decide who they truly were. The struggle had been painful, but it planted a seed of strength in both of them. They started to dream not of fitting into the world's expectations, but of breaking them. They wanted to prove that their value lay not in their skin, but in their spirit. And though the world still saw them as the different color twins, the sisters knew that inside, they were more than that. They were warriors, survivors, and dreamers, two souls bound by blood, by love, and by the struggle to define themselves in a world that never stopped questioning them. Inside the walls of their home, the twins were just sisters. No one compared them, no one asked strange questions, and no one doubted that they belonged together. Their parents treated them with equal love, making sure each child felt cherished. When the outside world brought confusion and judgment, their house became a safe haven. a place where differences didn't matter. The family had a simple tradition. Every evening they would gather around the dinner table. Their father would ask each twin about her day, listening carefully, never letting one voice overshadow the other. Their mother always placed her hands gently on both their shoulders as if to remind them, "You are both my heart." These small acts built a bond stronger than anything the world could break. But the outside world didn't rest. Whenever the family stepped out together, eyes followed them. At the park, strangers would ask, "Are they really twins?" In stores, cashiers leaned forward with disbelief. Sometimes even friends of the family whispered questions that stung. The twins grew tired of always being explained. They wanted to just be, to laugh and play like other children without turning into a story for others to tell. Yet at home, their parents worked hard to balance the weight. When the lighter-skinned twin received extra attention from neighbors, her father reminded her not to let it change her heart. "Beauty is not in the skin," he said. "It is in the kindness you show." When the darker-skinned twin felt invisible, her mother held her close and whispered, "You shine brighter than they can see." One day the world will notice. The sisters clung to these words. They learned early that the outside world might not always be fair, but family was their anchor. On stormy days when cruel comments made them cry, they found comfort in each other. They would sit together on the bed, holding hands in silence. No words were needed. The warmth of their bond spoke louder than any insult. Holidays brought even more proof of their unity. Every year their family decorated the house with lights, baked cookies, and shared stories. The twins would wear matching pajamas, giggling as they tore open gifts side by side. To them, these were the moments that truly mattered, not the stares of strangers or the whispers in school hallways. They knew the world outside saw two girls who looked nothing alike. But inside their home they were one soul and two bodies. As they grew older, the contrast between family love and outside judgment became sharper. At school, the darker-skinned twin was once asked if she was the adopted one. The words pierced her heart, but that evening when she told her parents, her father lifted her chin and said, "Blood does not lie. You are ours. You are hers. Never forget it." Her sister wrapped her arms around her, repeating, "You're mine, always mine." In that moment, the sting of the world faded. There were times when even relatives doubted. At family gatherings, distant cousins would murmur, "How can this be possible?" Some suggested tests as if proof was needed. The twins hated those moments, but their parents stood firm, refusing to let anyone divide them. "These are our daughters," their mother declared once in front of everyone. "Different colors, yes, but the same heart. If you cannot accept them, you do not understand love." Hearing those words, the twins felt pride swell inside them. They realized that while the world outside might never stop questioning, their family would always defend them. Their home was not just a place, it was a shield, a fortress built from love. Still, the outside world continued to test their unity. Teenagers at school sometimes tried to pit them against each other. "You must be jealous of her," they said to one. "You must wish you looked like her," they said to the other. But the twins never allowed those words to break their bond. Instead, they answered with laughter, sometimes holding hands tighter in front of those who tried to divide them. Their closeness confused people, but it also silenced them. Through it all, the sisters learned an important truth. The world could choose to separate them, but only they could decide whether to let it happen. And they refused. They built their strength in the small, everyday moments. Late-night talks, shared secrets, whispered dreams under the same blanket. In the outside world, they were symbols, oddities, a story that people couldn't stop telling. But at home, they were simply daughters, sisters, best friends. That balance between love inside and doubt outside shaped them in powerful ways. The world would keep trying to pull them apart, but their family bond was unbreakable. And with every challenge, it only grew stronger, preparing them for the even greater struggles that awaited in the years ahead. The teenage years are never easy for anyone, but for the twins they came with storms heavier than most could imagine. By the time they entered high school, their differences were no longer just something that drew stares. It became the lens through which everyone judged them. On the first day, as they walked through the crowded hallway, whispers followed like shadows. "Are they really twins?" one student asked loudly. "No way, they don't even look related," another scoffed. The sisters had heard such things all their lives, But teenagers were harsher than curious children. Now the questions carried laughter, mockery, and sometimes cruelty. The lighter-skinned twin often found herself surrounded by attention she hadn't asked for. Boys complimented her eyes, her hair, her smile. Girls asked to take selfies with her, eager to post them online. At first, she blushed and smiled politely, but inside she felt uncomfortable. She wasn't being seen for her personality or her dreams. She was treated like a prize to be admired. Her sister's experience was the opposite. Teachers sometimes paused when calling attendance, almost as if they doubted she belonged in the same family. Classmates ignored her in group projects, assuming she had less to contribute. When people realized she was the twin, their eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? But you don't look like her?" they would say, as if her identity needed constant proof. The unfairness became harder to carry as the years went on. The lighter-skinned twin felt guilty for the privileges she received. Every time someone praised her, she thought of her sister standing quietly nearby, overlooked. The darker-skinned twin, meanwhile, wrestled with feelings of invisibility. She was talented, quick-witted, and brave, but so often her light was dimmed by the world's obsession with her sister. Sometimes this imbalance brought tension between them. After a school dance, the lighter twin returned home upset. She had been asked to dance so many times that she felt like an object, not a person. But when she tried to explain her feelings, her sister snapped, "At least they notice you. No one even asked me once." The words stung both of them, leaving silence hanging heavy between their beds that night. But even in their hardest moments, their bond never shattered. They always found their way back to each other. When the darker-skinned twin was bullied in the locker room, her sister stormed in and defended her with fire in her voice. When the lighter-skinned twin grew tired of people treating her like a trophy, her sister reminded her of the poem she wrote, telling her, "That's who you are, not their stares." High school also brought the pressure of social media. Photos of the twins spread across platforms. Some comments were kind. "They're so unique, beautiful in their own ways." But many were cruel. "She can't be her real sister. One is gorgeous, the other looks like a mistake." Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. Nights were filled with tears, and mornings with forced smiles. Their parents tried to shield them, but even at home the weight was visible. Their mother often sat between them, holding both their hands, saying, "You are not what people call you. You are who you choose to be." Their father reminded them, "Storms will pass, but your bond is forever." To cope, the twins threw themselves into their passions. The lighter-skinned twin joined the art club, pouring her feelings into paintings filled with color and depth. The darker-skinned twin found strength on the sports field, running faster, jumping higher, proving with every movement that she was powerful in her own way. They discovered that when the world tried to label them, their talents gave them a voice that couldn't be silenced. Yet the challenges of being teens went beyond attention and judgment. They also began to wrestle with identity in private. Late at night, they whispered questions to each other. "Do you ever wish we looked the same?" one asked. "Sometimes," the other admitted. "But then, maybe we wouldn't be us." Their differences, though painful at times, had shaped who they were. Without them, they wouldn't have learned resilience, loyalty, or the true meaning of love. By their final year of high school, the twins had faced countless battles, on the playground, in classrooms, on social media, but they had survived them all. They walked across the graduation stage hand in hand, their bond stronger than the doubts the world tried to plant. For the crowd, they were still the different-colored twins. But for each other, they were something deeper. Two souls who had weathered storms together and learned that family is not about looking alike. It is about standing side by side, even when the world tries to tear you apart. Adulthood came like a doorway swinging open, and for the twins, it was both exciting and terrifying. After years of being judged by their appearance, they finally had a chance to show the world that they were more than just the different-colored twins. They were determined to prove themselves, not as curiosities, not as subjects of endless questions, but as individuals with talents, dreams, and voices of their own. The lighter-skinned twin, who had always felt like people only noticed her looks, decided to chase her love for art. From childhood, she had filled sketchbooks with drawings and paintings, each one carrying pieces of her emotions. Now, she poured herself into it fully. Her canvases told stories, stories of confusion, of joy, of feeling torn between how the world saw her and who she really was. The more she painted, the freer she felt. Her sister found her strength in science. While others doubted her, she discovered joy in solving problems and searching for answers. She stayed up late reading about medicine, space, and biology. Unlike the stares and whispers that once defined her, numbers and facts never questioned her worth. Science saw her as she was, capable, curious, determined. Together they started to build lives of their own. But the world was still watching. Interviews and invitations returned. Journalists wanted to know, what are the twins doing now? The sisters, older and wiser, made a decision. If the world insisted on staring, then they would use the attention to tell a new story. This time it wouldn't be about their skin. It would be about their achievements. The first time they stood on a stage together as young adults, they weren't introduced as a mystery of genetics. Instead, one was called an artist, the other a scientist. The audience clapped not for how different they looked, but for how much they had accomplished. For the first time, the spotlight felt right. It was shining on who they truly were. Of course, the journey wasn't smooth. Doors didn't open easily, and prejudice didn't disappear overnight. The darker-skinned twin still heard doubts when she applied for jobs or joined competitions. People still sometimes assumed she was the less important sister. But instead of shrinking under those words, she used them as fuel. "I'll show them," she whispered to herself as she worked harder, studied longer, and pushed beyond limits others thought she had. Her sister faced her own struggles. In galleries, people often showed up only to see her unusual story, not her art. But once they stood in front of her paintings, silence fell. The colors, the emotion, the depth, it forced people to see her differently. "You're more than a face," one critic admitted after staring at her work. Those words mattered more to her than all the compliments about her looks combined. The twins also began speaking publicly about their experiences. They visited schools and universities, standing side by side in front of students who stared just like children once had. But this time, they were ready. "Yes, we are twins," they would say. "Yes, we look different. But our story is not about that. Our story is about learning to accept ourselves when the world told us we shouldn't. And so is yours." Their voices reached young hearts, inspiring others who felt different, reminding them that uniqueness was not a curse but a strength. Slowly, the narrative began to change. No longer were they only remembered as the miracle twins of color. They became known as the twin sisters who rose above doubt, who carved their own paths, who turned the weight of the spotlight into a platform of hope. At home, their parents watched with pride. They remembered the hospital room on the day of the twins' birth, the silence, the shock, the endless questions. Now, years later, they saw those same daughters standing tall, not as curiosities, but as women who had found their place in the world. The sisters themselves knew the journey was far from over. Life would bring new challenges, and the outside world might never fully stop comparing them. But they had reached a turning point. For the first time, they felt in control of their story. They were no longer just reacting to the spotlight. They were shaping it. They had proven to themselves and to everyone watching that they were more than their skin, more than their differences. They were artists, scientists, dreamers, and fighters. They were two voices, different yet united, showing the world that true identity comes not from what you are given at birth, but from what you choose to create with it. And though the world still saw them as the different color twins, the sisters now smiled at the title. For them, it was no longer a label of limitation. It was a banner of triumph, proof that they had turned what once divided them into the very thing that made them unforgettable. The day of the turning point didn't arrive with loud fanfare or flashing lights. It came quietly in a way neither twin expected. They had been living their lives, building careers, finding themselves, and slowly moving beyond the shadows of childhood labels. But the world, as it always had, found its way back to them. A popular magazine decided to revisit their story. At first, the twins hesitated. They had grown tired of being displayed as if they were curiosities. But then they looked at each other and realized something had changed. They were no longer little girls forced into the spotlight. They were women now, strong and unafraid. If the world wanted their story again, they would tell it on their own terms. When the magazine article was published, the response was overwhelming. Photos of the twins, now adults, confident and proud, spread across social media. But this time the captions were different. People didn't just marvel at their appearance. They shared admiration for their journeys. One became an artist, the other a scientist. Look at what they've accomplished, people wrote. The article opened the door to interviews, talk shows, and even documentaries. For years, the sisters had been defined by how they looked. Now, for the first time, people were paying attention to what they had done. The world seemed to finally understand. Their story was not about their skin, but about their strength. One interview in particular changed everything. Sitting side by side on a stage, the twins were asked the question they had heard all their lives. What is it like to be so different? The audience leaned forward, expecting the usual explanation about genetics. But instead, the darker-skinned twin leaned into the microphone and said softly, "Different is not a weakness. It is the reason we survived." Her words hung in the air, and the silence that followed felt powerful. Her sister added, "For years, people told us we didn't belong together. But look at us now. We are proof that love is stronger than appearance and family is stronger than doubt." The audience rose in applause, and the video of that moment spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched it, millions shared it, and millions were moved. It was then that the sisters realized the true purpose of their story. They were not just living for themselves anymore. They had become symbols of acceptance, of unity, of courage. Their pain, their struggles, their tears, all of it had prepared them for this moment, when their voices could heal others who felt different and alone. The turning point wasn't just about fame or recognition. It was about transformation. The twins, once seen as opposites, now stood as a single force. Together they began to travel, speaking at schools, conferences, and community events. Everywhere they went, they told their story, not the one others had written for them, but the one they had written for themselves. People in the crowds cried as they listened. Young children who felt out of place hugged their parents tighter. Teenagers who were bullied for being different felt hope spark in their hearts. Adults who had hidden parts of themselves for years suddenly found courage to step into the light. The twins' story became a mirror in which people saw their own struggles and victories. At home, their parents watched all of this unfold with tears in their eyes. They remembered the frightened looks in the hospital when the girls were first born. They remembered the questions, the gossip, the doubts. And now, they were seeing their daughters transform the very thing that once caused pain into a source of power for the world. The turning point also brought healing between the sisters. The guilt, the jealousy, the quiet comparisons, they melted away. They no longer measured themselves against each other because they finally understood they were not meant to compete. They were meant to complement, to lift each other, to stand as proof that two very different faces could belong to the same heart. For the first time, they looked at their reflection together not with confusion but with pride. One fair, one dark. One golden-haired, one curly-haired. And yet both shining with the same fire in their eyes. They weren't just twins, they were storytellers, fighters, and role models. The world, once shocked by their birth, was now stunned by their strength. What began as whispers of disbelief had grown into cheers of admiration. What once felt like a curse had become their gift. The turning point had come, and with it, the realization that they were no longer simply the different color twins. They were women who had rewritten the story the world once tried to write for them. And from that moment forward, they promised each other that they would never let their story be stolen again. Years had passed since the day the twins first stepped into the world, side by side, carrying the shock of their unusual birth. From tiny babies who made nurses whisper, to teenagers who wrestled with cruel stares, to young women who discovered their voices, they had walked a long, difficult road. And now, their story had entered a new chapter. The world no longer called them strange. Instead, people called them strong. They were no longer seen only as the different color twins. They were respected for their choices, admired for their courage, and celebrated for the message they carried everywhere they went. The lighter-skinned twin had grown into a celebrated artist. Her paintings filled galleries in cities around the world. Each canvas carried not just colors but emotions. Anger from the years of unfair attention, joy from the bond she shared with her sister, and hope for the people who looked at her art and saw themselves in it. Critics called her work a conversation without words. Visitors often left her shows in tears, moved by the depth of her creations. She had taken the label the world gave her and turned it into brushstrokes of power. The darker-skinned twin had built her own path in science. She worked in laboratories, wrote papers, and spoke at conferences. Her research on genetics fascinated many, not only because of her knowledge, but because her very existence was proof of the mysteries hidden in DNA. Young students looked at her and believed that they, too, could reach the stars of knowledge no matter what the world thought of them. She had turned her pain into curiosity, and her curiosity into progress. Together, the sisters continued to stand hand in hand, not only in public but in the private corners of their lives. They still shared late-night talks, laughter that only twins could understand, and tears that no audience would ever see. Their bond, tested by the harshness of the world, had not only survived, it had become unbreakable. What befell them now was not tragedy but transformation. They had become symbols of unity and diversity. People invited them not to explain why they looked different, but to explain how they stayed strong. Their voices echoed in schools, in books, in television interviews. They reminded everyone that difference is not a curse but a gift waiting to be understood. The world, once filled with doubt about them, now found hope in them. Parents who had children born different looked at the twins and saw a future filled with possibility. Teenagers who felt like outcasts wrote letters to them saying, "Because of you, I don't feel alone anymore." The sisters answered those letters with love, knowing that their story had become a light in the darkness for so many. Even with their success, they remained humble. They never forgot the small hospital where their lives began, or the quiet evenings when their parents defended them from cruel whispers. They often returned to their childhood home, sitting at the same dinner table where their father once asked about their day and their mother reminded them they were equal. In those moments, they remembered who they truly were, not symbols, not headlines, but simply daughters, sisters, and human beings. The twins also found joy in giving back. They started a foundation to support children who face discrimination for being different. They provided scholarships, art programs, and science workshops. Their goal was simple: to give others the chance to turn their struggles into strength, just as they had. As adults, they sometimes looked in the mirror together. One face fair, one face dark. Two reflections that had once confused the world, now standing as proof that beauty is found not in sameness but in contrast. They no longer asked, "Why us?" Instead, they whispered, "It was always meant to be us." And so what befell them now was not the weight of judgment but the wings of purpose. Their journey had turned them from children of whispers into women of voices. They had taken the story others wrote for them and rewritten it into something unforgettable. The world would always remember them as the twins who looked different. But those who truly listened would remember them for much more: their courage, their bond, and their reminder that love, when strong enough, can outshine every difference. What began as a birth that shocked everyone ended as a life that inspired millions.